supply chain, consulting, warehouse operations, market share, revenue, material handling, sales, transportation.
It's the end of the week. It's the end of the week. It's the end of the week. It's the end.
Gabrielle,
Hi, Charles.
it's the end of the week.
It is.
And welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We're very excited to have Gabrielle. Anyone who doesn't know, because you don't know this, Gabrielle, but we have this rapidly expanding audience of strangers. So to introduce you, you are a senior partner here at LIT and have been for a long time.
It's been almost 8 years.
You're one of the OGs of LIT.
Long time.
I'm not sure what OG stands for, but
Original gangster.
okay. Well, then it's appropriate.
Yeah.
And this is going to be an exciting episode because this is the first time we're going to attempt to add visual aids to the conversation.
We'll see how it goes.
So people who are tired of looking at me, I promise there'll be some pictures that will make everything look a lot better.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about we're going to go way back in history, and we're going to talk about Canada's fur trade.
Yes.
And before we do that, it'd be fun to just talk about, as people don't know this either, you are essentially a New York native, although at this point you've become a Montreal native.
Well, thank you.
Pretty close.
6 years, I think.
6 years.
Yeah.
But as an American,
Yeah.
you have this interest in this topic, which for us Canadians, it's always, we always get this kind of warm fuzzy that there's an American interested in our history. So
I say it's the
what
zeal
there?
of the convert. When you're new to something, then you're really into it.
The zeal of a convert, right.
I've always been interested in this part of American history and North American history. And so I'd read about the fur trade, I'd thought about it, and then what spurred me onto this project, what got me into it in the last couple of years, was I was walking my dog, taking my dog for a walk, and I found a box that someone had left out with their trash, and it was full of stamps, letters, postcards, canceled checks, but it looked kind of antique, and so I started looking through it, and it was with the trash, so I was like, okay. I just took it home, and I kind of looked through it, and it was cool, but I put it away, and that was like in 2019. Fast forward, it's COVID, like the dark era of COVID, when there was nothing to do.
Yeah,
and
you're depressed,
were just, like, home
looking for
every
anything
night.
to entertain yourself.
Anything to do that would be interesting. And I was like, huh. And I pulled it out of the closet, and I started looking through it, and it had all this cool stuff in it. So there were hundreds of antique postage stamps, so I got really into postage stamps, and I started looking through the letters. And one night I started Googling some of the names of the people that were in the letters, which was kind of silly because they'd been dead for a very long time. These letters, everything that's clear in the box was from the late 1890s to the early 1900s.
Yeah,
so,
that's crazy.
So cool. So anyway, so one of the guys I Googled came up with like a ton of results, and I was like, oh. And it turns out he worked for the Hudson's Bay Company, and the Hudson's Bay Company archives are digitized. And you can, it's all indexed, and so there's all this stuff about him, and it was like super cool. And I was like, oh, this guy in this letter is like here, and so that got me into Hudson's Bay Company, the archives, looking at it, and that's sort of how I dove into this. And again, it was COVID, so I had a lot of time. So.
And for folks who haven't visited our offices, this culminates, your passion for the Hudson's Bay and the fur trade culminates in essentially a museum exhibit in our new offices.
Yes.
That walk people through that very vital and important part of Canada's history.
Yeah.
From a very special lens, and we'll get into that lens in a second.
Yeah.
The first thing is, so why is the fur trade important?
Yeah. It's fundamental to the founding of Canada. And Canadian history, it's modern, let's say, Canadian history of the last couple hundred years is a story of extractive resources, and beaver furs were one of the first things that were extracted. So European settlers came to North America. They could see that there were a lot of beavers, and beaver hats were very popular in Europe at that time. So all men had different kinds of men of all different walks of life. They all had these hats made of beaver fur. And the Europeans, they had hunted their own European beaver to extinction. So they needed a new source of beavers, and these Europeans realized that they were in North America. And at the same time, the Industrial Revolution was getting going. There were all these manufactured goods, and the people making these goods wanted more markets to sell them to. So the idea came up of this trade, that the Europeans would bring manufactured goods to North America, where they would trade them for furs that the indigenous communities would capture, and that was the crux of the trade.
Yeah.
So.
But what's interesting then, if we go one step further, and back to why we would put up an exhibit, a museum quality exhibit on our walls, is as a logistics person, you had a special interest in the fur trade and how, what it implied about a supply chain.
Yes, because when you get into, okay, well, how did they do this trade of the furs for the manufactured goods? So then I started reading about it, and it was really cool. And there's all this supply chain stuff, and that's what got me super into it. So there were really two major fur trading companies in Canada in the 1700s. Really, it was like the height of it, 17 to the 1800s. And one of them, the biggest one, which still exists today, is the Hudson's Bay Company. And they had their strategy was they would take manufactured goods on a big ship, which they would go up through the Hudson Strait into Hudson's Bay by Greenland, like very far north, and they would land in the bay with the big ship, and then they would offload everything, and then they would trade at the edge of the bay, and then the trading would go south, where the indigenous communities were trading with each other, going all the way south, and then the furs would come north, and they would trade at the bay. They had a big trade going. About 100 years after they started, in the late 1700s, then the Northwest Company opened up, and they had a different strategy. So it was like, cool, because they had a different way of doing it, which was that they would bring the ship to Montreal, down the St. Lawrence River, so much further south, and then they would portage it overland to Lachine, where you grew up.
My hometown.
Exactly. To avoid the rapids in the river. And then they would take canoes, and they would bring all the goods by canoe through the river system into the Great Lakes, land on the western edge of Lake Superior at first Grand Portage and then Fort William, and there they would trade with the community. So the furs would come through the river and lake system from the far west, very deep inland, and come to Fort William, and then that's where they would trade one for the other. So these were two different strategies. The two companies were hugely competitive with each other, like to the point of war, basically, because they were encroaching on each other's territory.
At some point, those two, the river systems
exactly. When the Northwest Company comes in and starts going south, they cut off the trade that was going to Hudson's Bay.
Yep.
And so the HBC people are like, no one's coming north anymore, and so they're in a big fight with each other. But they've got different strategies, different kinds of boats, different cost structures, different kinds of people, in order to move these goods in different ways. And I thought that was really interesting.
And so and we're going to get into it. I got to, for people who, when we say the Hudson's Bay Company, Canadians now know that as the Bay, which continues to be a retailer. It is one of, if not the oldest incorporated company on planet Earth.
Certainly the oldest in the Western Hemisphere.
In the Western Hemisphere. And it's owned by an American private equity guy who owns a bunch of these.
They bought Lord and Taylor, I think.
Yeah, Lord and Taylor. And one of the most coveted titles in retail is that when you're the president of the Hudson's Bay Company, you still have the title of Governor of the Hudson's Bay.
Yeah.
So this New Yorker, probably someone you've run into at somewhere in Central Park, is officially known as the Governor of the Hudson's Bay.
Yeah, and that transition to a department store is very easy to see, like how it morphed. So you have this fur trade. They have big depots where there's major trading posts, which are like warehouses, and then they have outposts. All these different little small trading posts in the interior. So you end up with, you've got territory, you got stores kind of all over the place, and it's like kind of like a company town or something. They're like the only game in town. If you want stuff, you got to go to the Hudson's Bay Trading Post to get your stuff. And so morphing from like a backwater outpost that sells pots and pans,
general merchandise.
You see it becomes a store, it becomes a department store, and it just morphs into the department store model.
All right. Well, let's bring it back to what we've talked about when we talked about this, which is just the reason it's fascinating to us as supply chain consultants is the history of the supply chain. It's not so much the history of the supply chain; it's that these folks who ran both of these trade systems, networks, were solving supply chain problems.
Yeah.
Exactly the same supply chain problems as we solve today.
Yes.
Just that the technology and the hurdles and the barriers were different.
Yes.
But fundamentally the same problems that you encounter.
Yes.
And I mean, let's go. You start with demand, right? So I think you addressed that already. There was this hunger for beaver. Listen. We're not historians. We're allowed to get it wrong. Call us out if you know it's wrong. But I understood that it was particularly because the beaver pelt was waterproof. It withstood in the rain very well.
I could imagine.
And made it very attractive. Like, it wasn't just like it's good looking, but that it actually had a practical benefit. But who knows? So we got the demand, and as you said, you could create a buyer and seller because there was demand on both sides.
Yeah.
The indigenous communities and of North America had things they would be willing to buy and saw value in what the Europeans could provide. And then they, of course, in turn, could provide something that was highly valuable to the Europeans. So you got that demand, which is great.
Yeah.
And then you have this concept of a supply network, right? And you said something really interesting just a minute ago about that portage between Montreal and Lachine, which anyone who's in Montreal knows that Lachine is a 15-minute drive without traffic. It's nicknamed the first suburb because it is almost as old as Montreal itself. But these were water networks in the 1700s. Water is your main transportation method. There's no railroads, there's no highways.
Right.
And water presents all sorts of problems, like navigability, right?
Yes.
You could only bring a boat, an ocean-going boat to Montreal because there's a wall of rapids at Lachine that prevent these boats from going any further.
Right. And there's just they use different kinds of boats. There's big ships that come from Europe. There's large canoes, canot de maître, that would go certain distances. Then they had little smaller kind of sprinter canoes. And when you look in the course of HBC history over a couple hundred years, they are constantly innovating and changing with transportation. As transportation technology changes, they rapidly take advantage. And there's carts and there's dog sleds, and later there's airplanes and railroads, and there's all these things get added on later on.
What you just said was really interesting to me.
Yeah.
So you can imagine it's almost like last mile delivery today. Okay.
Yeah.
That we start with these ocean-going vessels as the trunk.
Yeah.
Then you have these giant canoes, which is how we describe them really. Giant canoes going up the St. Lawrence, mighty St. Lawrence River, through the Great Lakes.
Yeah.
But as people branch off into ever smaller lakes,
off the lakes and into the rivers,
the canoes have to get smaller, more portable,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
Just like when we see two trailers hooked up in tandem and then ending up with those folks on scooters delivering your meal thanks to Uber.
Yeah.
Just the other day, I live at the top of a hill, and I ordered some Uber, and it said that my driver was on bicycle. Mm-hmm. And I felt so bad, like, because I hope they give you a warning that says, like, you're going up a hill. Do you really want to on a bike? Do you really want to take this order? And I'm gonna have to extra tip. But thank God it was a motorized bike, so I didn't feel bad. I just took the food and said, on your way. But so that's like you were explaining the networks then essentially be your market becomes defined by the river network. Yes. All the drainage basins of the Hudson.
And also you have to imagine the Europeans had not explored further. A lot of this is also exploration, right? It's kind of an age in which they're doing trade, but it's mixed with a desire to explore, to find new things, to map. They're like obsessed with maps and going westward, and there's all these missions sent off to try to go. So that's especially in the 1700s, kind of this also going on at the same time, and they're trying to push further westward down more difficult rivers and more difficult portages to get even further.
You have a connection to Pittsburgh.
I do.
I have a deep love of Pittsburgh because of my long-standing relationship with my beloved American Textile Company.
Yes.
And people don't know this, but the original Pittsburgh is Fort Duquesne,
Yes.
a French fort. They're designed to protect the emerging fur trade. That's why it was
Yes.
first put there.
And that's where there's 3 rivers.
Right. I mean, why they call it 3 rivers? It's 2 rivers joined to become an.
The
Anyway.
Allegheny, the Monongahela.
Yeah,
And,
and the Ohio.
and the Ohio.
But I just don't understand why the Monongahela didn't just say the Allegheny joins the Monongahela and continues on as the not my business. So we, that canoe as the essential the truck the
Yes.
truck of the
And
highway.
The canoes were a technology that the indigenous communities brought
Yes.
to the project here, and they built them, maintained them, taught your Europeans about how to build them. So
One of the fascinating things that people have to think about when you think about the load, the carrying capacity of the canoe, there's obviously a weight limit.
yes,
There's also a volume of goods that you can store in there.
yeah,
And unlike a truck, the human beings compete, and their supplies, the food they have to eat,
exactly.
compete with the carrying capacity of the canoe, or compete with the goods for that. And they actually had this requirement. They wanted short, lightweight, strong, tough people. They didn't want I certainly would not qualify, not because I'm overly tall, but I'm certainly too voluminous to meet the stringent requirements.
The voyageurs, who were the
You know.
people rowing, the men who were rowing, they tended to be kind of short.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they'd look at me, they'd say, no, this is like 20 beaver hats that I'm ultimately displacing in the boat.
Right.
But as you were doing the research, what I loved, what you were sharing with us,
Yeah.
was the whole warehousing piece.
Yes, there's also the archives are enormous. There's like millions of pages of digitized. There's a lot of microfiche from the old style that has been digitized, and you can find inventory records, bills of lading, maps of warehouses, and and all these descriptions. I remember finding this one of the inventory like an inventory book. Like they had all these notebooks. They had like a ton of notebooks, and they all had a coding system for how to keep track of the notebooks. So you open it up, and it lists all the locations in the outpost or depot that they had stuff in. So it'd be like bale room, axe room, apothecary. It's like lists all these places, numbers them 1 through like 30, and then you turn the page, and the 1 through 30 is across the top. There's all these columns, and then it lists the products, and it tells you how many are in each location. And I was like, that's so cool.
So,
That's like
right,
they're taking
so
your inventory by location.
they're keeping
It's
detailed inventory.
very yes.
This is
exactly.
inventory records that they have to send to headquarters back in London.
Yeah, so it's all by hand. So there's like a ton of clerks, and they're all writing constantly, and they're recording every single transaction, every movement, everything. I mean, I say every, maybe not every single thing, but they're recording a lot of transactions.
They're doing their best to keep an accurate,
yes,
real-time, quote-unquote, record of inventory.
yes, and they have different books. So there's like an inventory books, and then there's like books of like payments to the employees, loans to the employees, all these different things. Then they would copy the books and send one set to London, which is where the headquarters were, and keep one set on site at the outpost or depot, wherever they were. And they had all these records, and that was very cool to see.
Yep.
How they did that.
Yeah, so here they are. They're doing their inventory management. They're recording transactions. They're duplicating it so that headquarters had a source of truth.
Yes.
I mean, these are concepts, again, remain relevant today. We just digitized all of this.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's almost funny. You could take someone and flash forward them into the future, and while they would be mystified by the how,
The technology. Right?
they would not be mystified by the why
Totally.
and what. That they would say, yes, this is what we wanted.
Yes,
If I'll-
and there's some. I got to see some of the reports. Like they're writing. They're taking. They would have these inspectors that would go to the outposts, and from the depot to all the outposts would go visit, and they're taking notes and describing what's happening, and in this way that's really they're running their business, and they're talking about what's coming in, what's going out, and what are the volumes of furs that they're able to find, and
Well, and the other part of the other side of that is these, well, we like to talk about when we think engineering principles were first applied in warehouse design, which we know is roughly the 1960s is when industrial engineering gets applied to. But of course, there's been engineering and good thinking going into
Totally.
the design of a warehouse for ages.
Yes. So
And
yeah.
and part of some of the things that you dug up from the archives.
They definitely had a sense of space usage, as you were talking about in the canoe, because the space was so precious in the canoes and in the ships. They had a series of different presses where they would press the furs and press the products so to make them take less space. They had a concept of standard units of sizes so that the bales were in standard sizes so they would pack nicely together. And then they numbered the bales. They had lists of by number what was in it, who it belonged to, where it was going. They had a lot of the sort of proto concepts of things that we do today.
Well, and when, I remember when you told me that story about the pressing of the furs so that there's no air, right? Like when I not that I can bake a cake, but when you pound the cake to get the bubbles out and all that. But it reminded me in ancient Rome, so the amphora, which is where you store the wine, and so the wine's coming from all over the Mediterranean into Rome, and it's got the bottle's got this weird design. It's almost like a pinball with a spike on the bottom.
Okay.
And it's like, why do they do that? Well, very good reason. When I stack these amphora in a boat, the spike kind of acts as a stabilizer of the 4 amphora beneath it, so that all stacked together in 3 dimensions, it becomes this unit, which then can move with the waves.
Very cool.
And so I've just find so you can go back to ancient Rome and probably well before that even, and find people thinking about packaging and being most economic, both space and in the warehouse and then also in transportation.
Yeah.
I think the last kind of fun thing is that we of course are always dealing with our clients who are complaining about driver shortages, not so much in town, right, but long haul driver shortages. Yep. And so tell us a little bit about what was the long haul driver of the 16th century like? Well,
so it's interesting. So European men who didn't have a lot of job prospects, the New World was a great place to find a job.
100%.
So there's a whole influx of young men who come over and work for work for HBC in particular, including the guy that I first researched that I mentioned earlier from the letters. He was born in England and comes over as like an 18 or 19-year-old and works on the ships, and then it becomes a clerk and spends 20 years working for HBC. So you have that group of people. You also had men who were called pork eaters, and the pork eaters would take the product from Lachine to Fort William. So they're kind of the
modern day Thunder Bay.
Yes, in Ontario. So the pork eaters, and they were called that because they got pork in their provisions. They wintered in the city. They wintered in Montreal and Lachine. So they were a little bit more urban, and they were maybe a little better fed. And they brought the manufactured goods to Fort William, and then brought the furs back from Fort William to Lachine for export. Then you have from Fort William into the interior the Northmen who live in the north, and they winter in the countryside and with the indigenous communities.
Wild bunch.
A wilder bunch, and the Northwest Company actually encouraged intermarriage. They wanted their men to marry indigenous women because they thought that would strengthen their bonds
to the territory that they're working.
To the territory they're working, but the bonds with the communities with the company. That would increase that would bond the buyers and the sellers together. The Hudson's Bay Company discouraged intermarriage and didn't really want that to happen, and had kind of more of a class of clerks and directors that were sort of more separate.
I mean, we never recommend to our clients that they should marry their suppliers. We're neutral on it.
Yeah, so the marriage, the Northwest Company Voyageur and the Indigenous Communities marriage, that created the Métis kind of mixed community that's still in
thriving in Manitoba.
Around there.
That is, I find, fascinating, and it's been great. And as you can see, it goes so much faster than you think because you go on for hours. But there's one little piece that I know I'm not allowed to ask, but it can always be cut. So, is that your only? Wouldn't you want to know what would it be like to be one of those Northmen canoeing on the wild rivers?
Yes, in fact, I did wonder that. It is true that when I was about 15, I took a month-long canoe trip where we pretended to be voyageurs, and it was because I was learning French, and I'm sad to say that I think my French at 15 was probably better than my French today.
Your French is very good, Gabrielle.
Thank you. But
So
yeah,
you
so we
canoed?
around Minnesota in the lakes, and we ended at Grand Portage, which is near Thunder Bay, and there's a fur trading museum there, and I have a very distinct memory of going to the museum and thinking it was really cool, and the whole trip was so cool, and so I kind of always was interested in this topic, and then revisited it later on.
Two things we learned about Gabrielle as bookends to this very good conversation about the fur trade is that if you put out semi-interesting materials in your garbage, Gabrielle will pick it up, and that there was a time when Gabrielle went on a month-long canoe trip, something that I never in my life would want to do. So that's really
cool.
a pretty cool thing, especially up in Blackfly country of Minnesota. That would be just the flies alone. Well, I really appreciate that you spent this time.
Oh, thank you.
I know that this is going to get released slower than most because
we're going to add some graphics.
we are going to show off all the amazing images that you've collected as part of your research that went into the archive, the museum display, and the book that you've put together on it.
Yeah, so there's a book that's going to come out soon in a self-published way. That is the museum.
Oh, actually,
The exhibit content.
no, but I have some folks at Random House who've expressed interest, so let's see what happens. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.